The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday evening in downtown Chicago. Robert Harrison pulled his expensive coat tighter as he walked out of the Grand Plaza Hotel, where he had just attended another charity dinner. These events were becoming harder for him to sit through. Tonight's cause was helping children in need, and every speech, every photo of a smiling kid felt like a knife twisting in his chest. 8 years. It had been 8 long years since the accident that took his daughter away from him. 8 years of guilt, sleepless nights, and wondering what he could have done differently. The successful businessman who had built a technology empire worth billions couldn't buy back the one thing that mattered most to him. Robert's driver was waiting with the car, but he waved him away. He needed to walk to clear his head before going home to his empty mansion. The streets were mostly empty because of the rain, just the way he preferred it these days. Fewer people meant fewer questions, fewer fake smiles, fewer people telling him how sorry they were for his loss. As he turned the corner onto 5th Street, he noticed a young boy sitting under the awning of a closed bookstore. The kid couldn't have been more than 14 or 15, wearing clothes that had seen better days and a thin jacket that wasn't doing much against the cold rain. Most people would have walked past without a second glance, but something made Robert stop. Maybe it was the way the boy was sitting, so still and quiet, not bothering anyone. Or maybe it was how he wasn't holding up a sign or asking people for money like Robert had seen others do. The kid was just sitting there, watching the rain fall, looking like he was thinking about something important. Robert found himself walking over. "Pretty rough night to be out here," he said, keeping his voice gentle. The boy looked up with sharp brown eyes that seemed older than his years. "I've had worse," he replied with a small shrug. "At least there's cover here." "What's your, name, son?" "People call me Tommy," the boy said, studying Robert's face carefully. "You look like someone who's got troubles on his mind." Robert was surprised by the observation. Most people saw his expensive suit and assumed his life was perfect. "What makes you say that?" Tommy pointed to a nearby bench that was partially covered by another awning. "Want to sit for a minute? You look like you need to talk, and I'm not going anywhere in this rain." Against his better judgment, Robert found himself sitting down next to this strange boy who seemed wise beyond his years. "You're pretty observant for someone so young." "You learn to read people when you live on the streets," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "It keeps you safe. You learn who's dangerous, who's kind, and who's carrying around pain they can't let go of." Robert felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "And which one am I?" "The last one," Tommy said without hesitation. "You've got the look of someone who lost something important. I've seen it before." For reasons he couldn't explain, Robert found himself opening up to this homeless teenager. "I lost my daughter 8 years ago. Car accident. She was only 11. Tommy nodded slowly. "That's the worst kind of pain. I'm sorry." "Thank you." Robert was quiet for a moment, watching the rain. "What about you? How did you end up out here?" "Foster care," Tommy said simply. "Aged out of the system when I turned 18 last month. Been bouncing around group homes since I was 7. Some were okay, some weren't. That's a long time in the system. Yeah, well, not many people want to adopt older kids, especially ones who've been through what I've been through." Tommy paused, then looked directly at Robert. "But I met some good people along the way. Other kids who became like family, you know?" Something in the boy's tone caught Robert's attention. "Tell me about them." Tommy's expression grew thoughtful. "There was this one girl. Spent a couple years in the same group home with her when I was about 12. Smart kid, really smart, always talking about science and computers and stuff. Said her dad was some big-shot businessman who worked with technology. Robert's heart skipped a beat, but he tried to keep his voice steady. What was her name? Everyone called her Lily. Lily Martinez. At least that's what they told us. But she always said that wasn't her real name. Tommy looked out at the rain. She used to talk about her real father all the time, said he was rich and important, but that he thought she was dead. The world seemed to stop spinning around Robert. His hands started shaking, and he gripped the bench to steady himself. What did you say? Tommy turned to study Robert's face again, his eyes narrowing slightly. She said her father thought she was dead, but she wasn't. Said it was complicated, something about keeping her safe. She was always hoping that someday she could go back to him. That's impossible, Robert whispered, his voice barely audible above the rain. My daughter died in a car accident. I saw the wreckage. I went to her funeral. Maybe, Tommy said quietly. But this girl, Lily, she knew things. Details about a rich man who built computers and software. She knew about a big house with a swimming pool and a library full of books. She knew about a man who used to read her stories every night before bed. Robert felt like he couldn't breathe. Those details, they were too specific, too personal. Only his daughter would have known about their bedtime routine, about the library he had built just for her. She used to cry sometimes, Tommy continued, his voice gentle but firm. Said she missed her dad so much it hurt. But she also said she understood why she had to stay hidden. Something about bad people who might hurt her father if they knew. She was alive. Stop, Robert said, his voice breaking. Please, just stop. This isn't possible. But Tommy didn't stop. She made me promise something before she left the group home. Said if I ever met someone who seemed like they might be her father, I should tell them the truth. She said her father was a good man who deserved to know she was okay. Robert stood up abruptly, pacing in the small covered area. His mind was racing, trying to process what this boy was telling him. When did you last see her? About 2 years ago. She got moved to a different placement when she turned 16. Said something about it being safer for her to be in a smaller town, away from the city. Why are you telling me this? Robert demanded, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and desperation. Why now? Tommy stood up too, facing Robert directly. Because when I saw you walk out of that hotel tonight, something clicked. She showed me a picture once, an old newspaper clipping she had hidden. It was about a businessman whose daughter died in a car accident. The man in that picture looked just like you. Robert's legs nearly gave out. He sat back down heavily on the bench, his head in his hands. This can't be real. I grievated for 8 years. I blamed myself for 8 years. She said her father was a good man who gave money to help kids, Tommy said softly. Said he probably thought it was his fault, but it wasn't. She said the whole thing was set up to protect both of them. Protect us from what? Tommy shrugged. She never told me all the details. Just said she saw something she wasn't supposed to see. And that there were dangerous people who would hurt her and her father if they knew she was alive. Robert looked up at this young man who had just turned his world upside down. Do you know where she is now? No. But I know someone who might. The social worker who handled her case, Mrs. Johnson. She was different from the others, actually cared about the kids. If anyone would know where Lily ended up, it would be her. The rain was starting to slow down, but Robert barely noticed. His mind was spinning with possibilities, with hope he hadn't felt in 8 years, and with anger at whoever had kept his daughter from him. "Tommy," he said finally, "if what you're telling me is true, if my daughter is really alive somewhere, I need to find her." "I figured you'd say that," Tommy replied with a small smile. "That's why I'm going to help you. Lily was like a sister to me. She deserves to be with her real family." Robert pulled out his phone, his hands still shaking. "I'm calling my private investigator right now, and then I'm calling the detective who worked my daughter's case. If she's alive, if she's really alive, I'm going to find her." As he started to dial, Robert looked at Tommy again. This homeless boy had just given him something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. Whatever happened next, his life would never be the same again. Robert couldn't sleep that night. He sat in his home office until dawn, staring at his phone and replaying every word Tommy had said. Part of him wondered if he was losing his mind, if grief had finally driven him to believe impossible stories from a homeless teenager. But another part of him, the part that had built a billion-dollar company on gut instincts, told him Tommy was telling the truth. At 6 in the morning, he called his private investigator, Mike Chen. Mike had worked for Robert's company for years, before starting his own security firm. If anyone could help him make sense of this situation, it was Mike. "Robert? It's pretty early, even for you." Mike's voice was groggy but alert. "Mike, I need you to drop everything. I think my daughter might be alive." There was a long pause. "Robert, we've talked about this before. I know you've never fully accepted what happened, but the evidence was clear. The accident, the body, the funeral." "Just listen to me," Robert interrupted, and then told Mike everything Tommy had shared. When he finished, Mike was quiet for a long time. "Okay," Mike said finally. "I'll start digging. But Robert, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this kid is either confused or trying to take advantage of you. I know. But I have to know for sure." Robert's next call was to Detective Patricia Williams, the officer who had handled his daughter's case 8 years ago. Patricia had always been kind to him, patient with his questions and theories about what really happened that night. "Mr. Harrison," Patricia said when she answered, "it's been a while. How are you holding up?" "Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Was there anything about my daughter's case that didn't feel right to you?" Another long pause. "Robert, what's this about? Please, just answer the question." Patricia sighed. "There were some things that bothered me, small details that didn't quite add up, but the evidence was solid and my superiors closed the case." "What kind of details?" "The positioning of the car after the crash was odd, and there were some federal agents who showed up and took over parts of the investigation. They said it was routine, but it felt strange to me." Robert's heart was pounding. "Federal agents? You never told me about that." "I wasn't supposed to. Look, Robert, can you come down to the station? I think we need to talk in person." 3 hours later, Robert sat across from Patricia in a small conference room at the police station. She had pulled out the old case files and spread them across the table. "I've been thinking about our conversation all morning," Patricia said. "There were things about that night that never sat right with me. But I was a junior detective then. I didn't push back when the feds took over. Tell me everything." Patricia opened the file. "Your daughter was supposed to be at her friend Katie's house that night for a sleepover. But when we called Katie's family, they said the sleepover had been canceled. Your daughter never showed up there. So where was she?" "That's what bothered me. The timeline didn't make sense. The accident happened at 11:30 p.m. on Riverside Drive, but that wasn't on the route between your house and Katie's house. What was she doing there? Robert felt sick. I never knew any of this. Why didn't you tell me? The federal agents said they would handle all communication with the family. They said it was for your own protection. Patricia looked uncomfortable. I should have fought them on that, but I was young and they outranked me. What else? Patricia pulled out another file. This is the part that really bothered me. The body was identified through dental records, but the face was too damaged to recognize. At the time, that seemed normal given the severity of the crash. But now, looking back, you think it might not have been her? I think it's possible. The federal agents were very insistent that the case be closed quickly. They said there were national security concerns. Robert's hands were shaking. National security? What could my 11-year-old daughter have to do with national security? I don't know. But I remember one conversation I overheard between two of the agents. They mentioned something about a witness protection program. The room started spinning around Robert. Everything Tommy had told him was starting to make sense in a horrible way. Patricia, I need you to help me. There's a social worker named Mrs. Johnson who might have information about where my daughter is now. Robert, if what we're thinking is true, if your daughter is alive and in witness protection, there are going to be people who don't want us digging into this. I don't care. She's my daughter. That afternoon, Robert met with Mike at his office. Mike had spent the morning making calls and checking databases. I found Mrs. Johnson, Mike said. Carol Johnson, works for the State Child Welfare Department. She's agreed to meet with us, but she seemed nervous when I mentioned your daughter's case. When can we see her? Tonight. She said it had to be after hours, somewhere private. They met Carol Johnson at a small diner outside the city. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and worry lines around her face. She looked around nervously before sitting down. Mr. Harrison, she said quietly, I've been expecting this day for 8 years. You know about my daughter? Carol nodded. I was the one who placed her in foster care under the new identity, Lily Martinez. It broke my heart to keep her from you, but they said it was the only way to keep both of you safe. Robert felt tears coming to his eyes. She's really alive? She's alive. She's grown up to be a remarkable young woman, smart, kind, resilient. She talks about you all the time. Where is she? Carol hesitated. Mr. Harrison, the people who arranged this, they're not going to be happy that you're asking questions. Your daughter witnessed something she wasn't supposed to see. What did she see? Your business partner at the time, Richard Blackwood, was using your company to launder money for some very dangerous people. Your daughter happened to be in your office that night when she shouldn't have been. She saw a meeting, heard conversations about moving illegal money. Robert felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Richard, but he was my best friend. My business partner for 10 years. The federal agent said Richard and his associates would kill both you and your daughter if they knew she could testify against them. The only way to protect her was to make everyone think she was dead. But why didn't they tell me? Why did they let me suffer all these years? Carol's eyes filled with tears. Because they needed your grief to be real. If you had known your daughter was alive, you might have acted differently around Richard. He might have gotten suspicious. Mike leaned forward. Where is Richard now? In federal prison. Has been for 3 years. That's why I agreed to meet with you. The immediate danger is over, but there are still people out there who might want revenge. Robert wiped his eyes. I need to see her. I need to see my daughter. She wants to see you too. She's been waiting for this day since she was 11 years old. Carol pulled out a piece of paper. She's living in a small town called Millbrook, about 3 hours from here. She's working as a waitress at a local diner while she goes to community college. What name is she using now? Lily Martinez. But she's been planning to tell people her real name once it was safe. Robert took the paper with shaking hands. It had an address and phone number written on it. Mr. Harrison, Carol said gently. She's not the same little girl you remember. She's been through a lot. Foster care, living with strangers, always having to hide who she really was. She's strong, but she's also had to grow up fast. I understand. I just want her to know that I never stopped loving her, never stopped missing her. She knows. She's kept every newspaper article about you and your charity work. She's proud of what you've accomplished, even though it hurt her that she couldn't be part of it. As they left the diner, Robert felt a mixture of joy and anger that he'd never experienced before. His daughter was alive, but 8 years of their lives together had been stolen from them. 8 years of birthdays, school events, bedtime stories, and just being a father. Mike put a hand on his shoulder. Are you ready for this, Robert? Once you make contact with her, there's no going back. Robert looked at the address in his hand. Tomorrow, he would drive to Millbrook. Tomorrow, he would see his daughter for the first time in 8 years. The little girl who loved science and computers was now a young woman who had survived things no child should have to go through. I've been ready for 8 years, he said. It's time to bring my daughter home. Robert barely slept that night. He packed and repacked a small bag 3 times, changed his clothes twice, and practiced what he would say to his daughter over and over again. How do you approach someone you thought was dead for 8 years? How do you explain 8 years of grief to a child who had been forced to grow up without her father? At dawn, he was already in his car, driving toward Millbrook. The 3-hour drive felt like the longest journey of his life. Every mile brought him closer to his daughter, but also closer to facing the reality of all the years they had lost. Mike had offered to come with him, but Robert knew this was something he had to do alone. As he drove through the small town of Millbrook, he was struck by how different it was from the city where they used to live. Simple houses, tree-lined streets, and a peaceful quiet that felt like another world. The diner was called Sonny's Place, a small building with yellow walls and checkered curtains in the windows. Robert sat in his car across the street for 10 minutes, gathering the courage to go inside. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely turn off the engine. Finally, he took a deep breath and walked across the street. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and he found himself in a cozy space with maybe 10 tables and a counter with stools. The smell of coffee and fresh pie filled the air. And then he saw her. She was behind the counter, pouring coffee. For an elderly man, her back turned to the door. But Robert knew instantly it was his daughter. She had grown tall. Her hair was longer and darker than he remembered, but the way she moved, the way she held her head, was unmistakably his little girl. "I'll be right with you," she called out without turning around, her voice warm and professional. Robert couldn't speak. He couldn't move. 8 years of wondering, hoping, and grieving had led to this moment, and he felt completely overwhelmed when she turned around. Their eyes met across the small diner. The coffee pot slipped from her hands and crashed to the floor, sending coffee and ceramic pieces everywhere. Her face went completely white, and she gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. "Dad?" she whispered, so quietly he almost couldn't hear her. "Hello, sweetheart," Robert managed to say. his voice breaking on the words. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Robert saw his 11-year-old daughter in her face, but she was also clearly a young woman now. She was beautiful, with kind eyes and a strength in her expression that spoke of everything she had been through. "Oh, my God," she said, tears starting to fall down her cheeks. "Oh, my God, it's really you." The elderly customer looked confused, and the cook came out from the kitchen to see what had happened with the broken coffee pot. But Robert and his daughter only had eyes for each other. "Lily," the cook said gently, "are you okay? Do you know this man?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. "This is my father, my real father." Robert took a step forward, then another, until he was standing just a few feet away from her. Can I hug you?" She nodded and came around the counter. When they embraced, Robert felt like his heart might explode. She was real. She was alive. She was here. After 8 years of emptiness, his daughter was in his arms again. They held each other for a long time, both crying, neither wanting to let go. The other people in the diner gave them space, understanding that they were witnessing something special and private. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered against his shoulder. "I thought you were gone forever," he whispered back. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you." "Dad, it wasn't your fault. I know what happened. I know why I had to stay hidden." The cook, a kind-looking woman in her 60s, quietly cleaned up the broken coffee pot and gestured to a corner booth. "Why don't you two sit down? I'll bring you some coffee and give you some privacy." They sat across from each other in the booth, and Robert couldn't stop staring at his daughter. She was so different from the little girl he remembered, but also exactly the same. Her eyes still sparkled with intelligence, and she still had the same habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. "I can't believe you're really here," she said, reaching across the table to touch his hand, as if to make sure he was real. "Tommy found me, the boy from your group home. He kept his promise to you." Her face lit up. "Tommy, how is he? Is he okay?" "He's going to be fine. I'm going to make sure of that." Robert squeezed her hand. "Tell me about these 8 years. Tell me about your life." She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes, too. "It's been hard, Dad. Really hard sometimes. The first few years were the worst. I was so angry and confused. I didn't understand why I couldn't come home to you." "What did they tell you?" "Mrs. Johnson, my caseworker. She explained it when I got older. She said you thought I was dead because that was the only way to keep both of us safe. She said there were bad people who would hurt us if they knew I was alive." Robert felt anger rising in his chest again. "I should have been told. We should have found another way." "I used to think that too. I was so mad at everyone for keeping us apart. But as I got older, I understood. If you had known I was alive, you might have tried to find me, and that could have put us both in danger. Still, 8 years. I know, Dad. I missed you every single day. I missed our bedtime stories, our science experiments, our Saturday morning pancakes. I kept a journal and I wrote letters to you that I could never send." Robert's eyes filled with tears again. "I kept your room exactly the same. I couldn't change anything." "I know," Mrs. Johnson told me. "She said you never gave up hope, even when everyone else told you to move on." They talked for hours. She told him about the different foster homes, some good and some not so good. She told him about the friends she had made, like Tommy, who became like family to her. She told him about finishing high school while working part-time jobs, and How she was studying business at the community college because she wanted to understand the work her father did. "I followed your company in the news," she said. "I was so proud when I read about your charity work, about how you were helping kids. I always hoped that maybe some of the kids you helped were going through what I was going through. Everything I did, every charity I supported was because of you. Because I couldn't help you. You were helping me, Dad. You just didn't know it." Robert told her about his life, too. About the guilt and grief that had consumed him. About the sleepless nights. And the way he had thrown himself into work to avoid thinking about losing her. He told her about the therapy sessions and the support groups, and how nothing had ever filled the hole in his heart that losing her had created. "I want you to come home," he said finally. "I want us to be a family again." She was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the small-town street. "I want that too, Dad. I've wanted that for 8 years. But I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "I'm not the same person I was when I was 11. I've had to take care of myself, make my own decisions, survive in ways that kids shouldn't have to. I don't know if I know how to be your little girl anymore." Robert reached across the table and took both her hands in his. "You don't have to be my little girl. You're my daughter, and I love who you've become. I'm proud of the strong, independent woman you've grown into. We can learn how to be a family again together." "What about school?" "I'm halfway through my degree. Here, we'll figure it out. You can transfer to a university near home, or if you want to stay here and finish, I'll support that too. Whatever you want." She smiled through her tears. "I want to come home, Dad. I want to try." "There's something else," Robert said gently. "Tommy, the boy who told me about you. He's been living on the streets since he aged out of foster care. I'd like to help him too, if that's okay with you." Her face lit up completely. "Really? You'd do that?" "He brought you back to me. He kept his promise to you when he didn't have to. I think he deserves a family too. He always said he didn't need anyone, but he does. We all do." As the sun began to set outside the diner window, Robert and his daughter made plans for her to come home. She would finish out her work schedule at the diner, pack her few belongings, and drive back with him in a few days. "Dad," she said as they prepared to leave, "there's one more thing. My name. Everyone here knows me as Lily Martinez, but my real name is whatever you want it to be," Robert said. "You've been both people. You get to choose who you want to be now." She smiled. "I think I want to be both. Lily was the strong girl who survived 8 years on her own, but I also want to be your daughter again." As they hugged goodbye in the parking lot, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Complete happiness. His daughter was alive. She was safe. And soon they would be together again. The drive home felt different than the drive there. He wasn't racing toward an uncertain future anymore. He was going home to prepare for his daughter's return, and for the first time in 8 years, his house would truly be a home again. 3 days later, Robert stood in his driveway watching his daughter's small car pull up to the house she hadn't seen in 8 years. His heart was pounding with excitement and nervousness. Behind her car was another vehicle, and Robert smiled when he saw Tommy step out of the passenger seat. His daughter had insisted on driving herself home, saying she needed the independence after so many years of other people making decisions for her. Robert understood, even though every part of him wanted to wrap her in bubble wrap and never let her out of his sight again. "It looks exactly the same," she said softly as she got out of her car. staring up at the large house with its stone front and big windows. "I couldn't change anything," Robert admitted. "I kept hoping you'd come home someday." Tommy stood quietly to the side, clearly uncomfortable with the size and grandeur of the house. He was carrying a small backpack that seemed to contain everything he owned. "Tommy," Robert said warmly, "welcome home." The young man's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you for this. You brought my daughter back to me. There's nothing to thank me for." As they walked toward the front door, Robert's daughter stopped suddenly. "Dad, can we go in through the back? I want to see the garden first." They walked around to the backyard, where Robert had maintained the flower garden they used to work on together. It was bigger now, more elaborate, but still filled with the same types of flowers she had loved as a child. "You kept the roses," she whispered, touching a pink bloom gently. "Every spring I planted new ones and told myself it was because I liked gardening. But really, I was planting them for you." Tommy looked amazed at the size of the backyard, the swimming pool, and the garden. "This is like something from a movie," he said quietly. "It's just a house," Robert's daughter said, taking Tommy's hand. "The important thing is that it's going to be our home now." When they finally went inside, Robert watched his daughter's face carefully. She moved through the rooms slowly, touching familiar objects and looking at family photos that were still displayed everywhere. "My room," she said when they reached the second floor. "Is it really the same?" Robert opened the door to reveal a room that looked like it was waiting for an 11-year-old girl to return from school. The bed was made with the same purple comforter. Her stuffed animals were arranged on the shelves, and her desk still had homework from 8 years ago sitting on it. She sat down on the bed and picked up her favorite teddy bear, holding it close to her chest. "Mr. Whiskers," she said with a laugh that was half joy and half tears, "I missed you too." Tommy stood in the doorway, looking overwhelmed. "This is incredible. You kept everything exactly the way it was. Every night I would come in here and say good night to her," Robert said quietly. "It was the only way I could feel close to her." "Dad," his daughter said, standing up and hugging him again, "we're going to make new memories now. All three of us." Over the next few weeks, the house slowly came alive again. Robert's daughter chose to keep her childhood room, but also set up a study area in the library where she could work on transferring her college credits to a university nearby. She was determined to finish her degree, and Robert was proud of her dedication. Tommy had his own room for the first time in his life, and Robert enjoyed watching the young man discover simple luxuries like having his own bathroom and a closet for his clothes. Robert bought him new clothes and a laptop and enrolled him in online classes to help him finish his high school education. "I don't understand why you're being so kind to me," Tommy said one evening as they sat by the pool. "You kept a promise. To my daughter when you didn't have to," Robert replied. "And more than that, you're a good kid who deserves a chance." "But I'm not really family." Robert's daughter, who was swimming laps in the pool, stopped and climbed out. "Tommy, family isn't just about blood. You were my family when I had no one else. Now you're part of our family." The adjustment wasn't always easy. Robert's daughter had nightmares sometimes, memories of difficult times in foster care. She was used to taking care of herself and sometimes found it hard to let Robert help her with things. Tommy struggled with trust issues and couldn't quite believe that this new life was real and permanent. But they worked through the challenges together. Robert found a therapist who specialized in helping families reunite after trauma. They had family sessions where they talked about their feelings, their fears, and their hopes for the future. "I used to think I was broken," his daughter said during one session. "Like the experience of losing my family had damaged me permanently." "And now?" the therapist asked. "Now I think I'm just different. Stronger, maybe. And I think that's okay." Robert learned to give his daughter space while still letting her know he was there for her. He learned that she wasn't the same little girl he remembered, and that was actually a good thing. She was smart, independent, and had a strength that amazed him. Tommy blossomed in ways that surprised everyone. With stability and support, his natural intelligence shone through. He tested out of several high school classes and started taking college-level courses online. Robert discovered that Tommy had a gift for computer programming, something that reminded him of his own early days building his technology company. 6 months after the reunion, Robert made an announcement at dinner. "I've been thinking about starting a new project, a foundation to help kids aging out of foster care." "Really?" his daughter asked, her eyes lighting up. "I want to call it the Second Chances Foundation, and I want both of you to help me run it." Tommy nearly choked on his food. "You want me to help run a foundation? You understand what these kids are going through better than anyone. And you," he said to his daughter, "you know what it's like to be separated from family and how important it is to have people who care about you." His daughter reached across the table and took his hand. "Dad, that's an amazing idea. But are you sure you want to take on something this big?" "I've spent 8 years trying to fill the hole in my heart by making money and building businesses. But the only thing that's ever really mattered to me is family and helping people. This feels right." The foundation became a family project. Robert used his business connections and resources to fund it. His daughter worked on developing programs and policies, and Tommy became the face of the foundation, speaking to other kids who were aging out of the system. Their first event was a gala to raise money and awareness. As Robert stood on the stage, looking out at hundreds of people who had come to support their cause, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. 8 years ago, I lost my daughter, he said to the crowd. Or at least, I thought I did. That loss nearly destroyed me, but it also taught me something important. Family isn't just about the people we're born with. It's about the people we choose to love and care for. He looked at his daughter and Tommy, who were sitting at the head table beaming with pride. "Tonight we're launching the Second Chances Foundation because every child deserves a family, and every family deserves a second chance." The gala raised over $2 million, enough to fund programs in 3 states. But more importantly, it brought their new family together around a shared purpose. A year later, Robert stood in the same garden where he had once planted roses out of grief and hope. Now he was planting new flowers with his daughter and Tommy, talking about their plans for the foundation and their dreams for the future. "Dad," his daughter said as she helped him plant a new rose bush, "do you ever regret the way things happened, the 8 years we lost?" Robert thought for a moment. "I regret that you had to go through so much pain. I regret that we missed so many moments together. But I don't regret who you became or the fact that it brought Tommy into our lives. The hard things made us appreciate this more," Tommy added, his hands dirty from working in the soil. "If everything had been easy, we might not understand how special this really is." That evening, they sat on the back porch, watching the sunset. Robert looked at his daughter, now confident and happy as she planned her future, and at Tommy, who had grown from a scared homeless teenager into a young man with purpose and hope. "You know what the best part is?" Robert said. "What?" they both asked. "We have the rest of our lives to be a family, and this time no one can take that away from us." As the stars came out, they stayed on the porch talking about everything and nothing. Three people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from the pieces of their broken past. The little boy who had kept a promise, the father who never gave up hope, and the daughter who survived it all had created something none of them could have imagined alone. A real family, stronger because of what they had endured, and ready for whatever the future would bring.